But I want to take this question from Charles Hudson, please.
How can Britain face up to international challenges like Russian intervention in Crimea without the political weight which comes from being part of the European Union?
So political weight coming from the European Union. Nigel Farage.
By not becoming a political union with an expansionist foreign policy, with an aim to militarise as quickly as they can. Indeed, Baroness Cathy Ashton, the British Commissioner, is pushing very hard for a European Air Force and for a series of drones. And if you actually look at what's happened with the Ukraine, we've had a message that's been sent out now for 10 years, and this is not just the EU. Indeed, David Cameron, Nick Clegg, and I'm afraid Ed Miliband too. And the answer to Charles's question is, I don't want to be part of a European foreign policy.
The problem... But this is a dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true. The problem with people like Nigel Farage is they swing at windmills. They see conspiracies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage soon tells us that the moon landing was a fake, that Barack Obama isn't American, that Elvis isn't dead. You know, it is not going to happen. Stop.
Why do you deny your union?
He claimed last week that 485 million people were going to vacate the whole of the rest of the European continent and turn up in Britain, leaving no human habitation left in the rest of Europe. It's as silly as me saying that 5 million people living in Scotland might all move to Orpington next Tuesday.
Right,
it isn't going to happen.
Nigel Farage.
Nick, when are you going to start confronting a few simple truths and stop twisting the facts the way you did last week and you're doing this week? You're doing it again. You're saying that I said 485 million people would come to Britain. I didn't. I said they were able to. You came up with the most twisted trade figure I've ever heard. And last week you even said, you tried to tell the British people that only 7% of our national laws emanate in the European Union.
That is true.
I thought you believed in the European project. You and I both know that the whole point of the Constitution, which you supported, was to make the European Union an economic and a military superpower.
No.
And now you deny the fact they're trying to build a European Air Force.
It is a dangerous fantasy.
It's about... Well, you keep using this word fantasy.
Well, it is a fantasy.
Why are you
just
denying?
not true.
I thought you were here to defend the European Union.
No,
they want an army, navy and air force.
I also want to explain the truth and the reality,
but it's
rather
not
than
true,
this fantasy world which you keep talking about, which simply doesn't exist. It's saying that, oh, I only said 485 people are entitled to move here. It's like me saying, well, 5 million Scottish people are entitled to move to Orpington. It's not going to happen.
OK, we've got to move on. Can I just ask you...
Calls to create a joint EU army are growing stronger throughout the bloc. Finland and Germany say they're on board with the idea, which was put forward by the head of the European Commission on Sunday. Let's get more from our Berlin correspondent, Peter Oliver, just now. Hi, Peter. Good to see you. So what's the general feeling in Europe about creating its own army?
Well, in general, the feeling is rather much indifference. However, key players have said that they're on board with it. Finland have said they're on side with creating this, but most notably, Germany have said that they're on side with it. We heard from Jean-Claude Juncker saying that an EU army was the future. Well, that was pretty much backed up by the German Defence Ministry here in Berlin. The quote from them was that it was a vision whose time has come. It's not the first time, though, that the EU has broached this subject. The last time was back in 2013, and it was thoroughly scotched by the United Kingdom.
It isn't right for the European Union to have capabilities, armies, air forces and the rest of it.
Of course, Eurosceptic groups in the EU are against this. We heard from them speaking about the subject of raising an EU army, and, well, they're not on board.
Army, their own or someone else's. Now Brussels wants its own army. Do you think this is a good idea?
Well, the EU Commission President, Jean-Claude Juncker says he needs an army. However, Russia counters that by saying this is just the paranoia of the European Union, that Russia has no intention of going to war with anybody, and the idea of creating an EU army in order to counter Russia, well, it's simply ridiculous.
Peter Oliver in Berlin, thanks for that update. Russia dismisses its claims that it could be a threat to European security. Fears of possible aggression have been haunting Europe in recent months. Last October, Sweden spent more than €2 million and an entire week on a massive but fruitless hunt for a phantom Russian submarine. And last December, the UK also sounded the alarm over a suspected Russian sub off of Scotland. There's also been much concern in the skies too. In January, UK fighter jets were scrambled to intercept 2 Russian military jets above the English Channel. There was a similar incident off of Cornwall last month. Both times, Russian jets were not violating borders and were spotted in international airspace. Former Belgian MP Lode van Noes thinks the plan to create an EU army is not only aimed at Russia, but at the US as well.
You do not defend values with an army. Democracy or prosperity or social economy, those are all things that are not military. The idea itself is not new at all. The context today, of course, is different. Actually, the European Union countries separately are already spending much more than, for example, the so-called opponent in this way, Russia. And they want to re-establish themselves militarily because economically they're losing ground. Within Europe, want to establish itself again as an entity next to the United States. I mean, this idea floated by Juncker now is not just aimed at Russia, it is aimed at the United States as well. No, we're not going to do as you tell us, you're an ally, but we define our policy ourselves.
Critics of the proposal say there's simply no need for an EU army when you have NATO, which is seen as the cornerstone of European defence. The bloc does have its own security and defence service, but its missions largely duplicate what NATO already does.
Following a United Nations request in 2008, NATO deployed a naval force to the region to escort ships that were carrying humanitarian aid to Somalia under the World Food Programme. Similar missions.
But the EU has also been doing just that. Its naval force was sent to the area at about the same time. The EU's first combat deployment to root out piracy off Somalia in 2008 is being seized on by Brussels critics for spending money on missions remarkably similar to NATO's. It's a view shared by Belgium's defence minister at the time.
We had a counter-piracy operation which was Atalanta. In fact, an operation of the European Union as a whole, but at the same time we had the operation Ocean Shield that was fostered by NATO. That's duplication, that's something that we should avoid.